While citizens eagerly await to hear who will emerge victorious in the general elections, early results are indicating that ZANU-PF is ahead in its traditional rural strongholds, while the main opposition Citizens Coalition for Change is also doing well in urban areas. There was a shortage of ballots on Wednesday, prompting President Emmerson Mnangagwa to extend voting onto Thursday, while SADC's mission observers has denounced the polls, arguing that they fell short of the country's constitution and electoral standards. To discuss this further, we have political analyst Vivid Gwede, who joins us from Zimbabwe's capital, Harare. Vivid, good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for joining us. And you can give us an assessment in terms of how the elections proceeded, whether it was free and fair. We hear from the election observers mission that they have denounced the elections. Your view?
Thank you, Cindy. The elections have already, seen a lot of challenges. You saw the delays in opening of some of the polling stations, prompting some of the citizens to go back home. Some did return to cast their votes, some late at night and others on the second day. And, that was happening in the opposition strongholds of Harare, where we have also seen the planting of double candidates, so-called double candidates, but which the opposition disowned, and the results indicate that the opposition is cruising in those areas. We have also seen the disruption of the press conference of the Citizens Coalition for Change when its spokesperson, Promise Mkwananzi, was having a press conference to talk about some of the challenges that in this election. We have also seen, the SADC observer missions, the EU, giving their preliminary reports, which indicate that this election has failed to meet certain of the standards, including those of the SADC guidelines and principle governing democratic elections. We have also seen the ruling party ZANU-PF trying by all means to discredit the electoral observer missions, including that of SADC. So these are the challenges that we are seeing in this election, and it does affect how things will pan out in terms of when the results are finally announced. We have also seen the arrest of civil society leaders, civil society staffers from the Electoral Resource Center and the Zimbabwe Election Support Network for simply putting up a situation room and observing the elections and collecting data about this election. And these people were about 20 hours. For about 20 hours, they couldn't talk to their lawyers. And obviously, their work in this particular election has been disrupted. So that is what we are seeing in this election, and we hope that the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission will come to the party and be fair and transparent, especially when it comes to announcing the results, including the presidential election results.
All right, so what are the preliminary results that are expected? Because currently, from the polls in front of me, is that ZANU-PF leads in the Zimbabwe's parliamentary and council elections, and yet the main opposition, the Citizens Coalition for Change, has won the metros of Harare and Bulawayo. What does this say about the trajectory, especially of the main opposition?
There are still results to be announced, but we've seen that the opposition has done well in even some of the ruling party areas. We've also seen that the opposition is swept clean in some of the metros also as well, like Bulawayo. They've done well in Harare, and they are doing well in some of the areas, but the results are still coming in, and the projection really looks like ZANU-PF won't be having the two-thirds majority. In terms of the presidential elections, we've also seen that the opposition is doing very well. And we just await to see how the results will come out. And I think the expectation from everyone in this election is that there has to be transparency, there has to be, the results have to be genuine and credible. And I think that's what remains in this election, for this election to stand the test of credibility. But we have seen, incidents like I have already indicated that are not, commendable, that don't meet international standards, that stain this election.
Yeah, notwithstanding the delayed ballots and that resulted in the extension of the voting period, would you say that it was largely a peaceful and harmonious election process for Zimbabweans?
It was in a sense, when we talk about like real serious violence, it was a bit peaceful. But we have seen incidences where opposition supporters, a number of them were attacked. There is an opposition supporter, Cindy, who died in Churu after being attacked in broad daylight by supporters of the ruling party. So these are some of the issues that have been, making this election unfair to some people, and also, difficult for people to express themselves, difficult for people to campaign. We've also seen rallies of the opposition CC party being banned, and the count until the elections was around more than 100 of those meetings. So that affected, the playing field. But largely, a calm election, a peaceful election. But as we have seen, things are beginning to heat up. Like I said, there was a press conference of the opposition, which was disrupted by people who looked like they were not really enforcing the law, and they were not really following the law. And we have also seen the arrest of the civil society leaders that I've talked about. So what we see is that things are heating up, and as the results are coming in, especially the presidential results, SADC and the EU and all the other, international observers, the international community, and the local, observers, I think need to still watch the situation very, very closely.
And just talk us through the voter turnout as well. You were saying that some voters had felt, unhappy or disgruntled for the fact that there had been these extended delays and then returned home. But in terms of the voter turnout, would you say that Zimbabweans really came out in their numbers, in their desire and thirst for change?
Zimbabweans really came out, determinedly. Like even in the situations that I've talked about, where the ballots arrived, a day after or even late into the night, some still remained on the polling stations. They came outside just waiting to cast their votes. So Zimbabweans have been really willing to express themselves through this election and make their voices count. So we've seen some serious enthusiasm by people to use this election as a way to hold the government accountable, as a way to express their democratic choice, as a way to exercise their rights. So we have seen really Zimbabweans, and I think because of that, Zimbabweans need to be supported because they've also they are playing their part. They need to be supported to make sure that the election expresses what they want, what their choice.
But if you compare to previous elections, I think this one probably speaks to the maturity of the Zimbabwean democracy, albeit there are loopholes and also allegations, suspicion of voter rigging and irregularities. In the main, I think it's early days to preempt in terms of where the official opposition will be, whether they'd be able to unseat the ZANU-PF, especially from their traditional strongholds. What is your view with what the landscape will look like if the results are anything to go by so far?
Sorry, can you come again?
Yes, I'm saying in terms of the strength of the opposition, the Citizens Coalition of Change, where they would find themselves in contesting some of the strongholds of ZANU-PF, or whether it will pretty much be the same status quo as before.
We have seen that some of the areas, traditional ZANU-PF strongholds, have gone back to ZANU-PF, but some have really, turned to the opposition. including areas in areas like Zimbabwe, where it was traditionally, a ZANU-PF stronghold. We've seen people there coming out for the opposition. I think the opposition has done very well in this election compared to other elections, especially compared to the 2018 elections. The opposition has done very well, but also given that the history of the opposition, this is an opposition party which was formed only last year in January, and we are already in elections, and so and it was formed in a context where a lot of things were happening. The environment, like I said, like the banning of Israelis, the environment in general was not conducive. The opposition had also lost its headquarters before, where Nelson Chamisa was the leader before of the MD Alliance, and he also lost the political finances, the political finances grant, and so we see an opposition that is coming from a very difficult place and performing wonderfully in this election, which also shows, I think, the state in which Zimbabweans are in terms of what do they want. They've really indicated that they don't want the ruling party to remain with that dominance, and we can see that the presidential election is something to really watch because previous polls towards this election were pointing to the fact that Nelson Chamisa would lead, and only towards the elections we also saw Africa Barometer indicating that that had changed slightly, but there were a big number of people who didn't want to indicate their preferences. And, because of the intimidation, because of the terror that happens in the Zimbabwean election, you could think that some of those people are really for the opposition. So this is a very serious context that is being put up by the opposition. And we expect that it will be strong in parliament. It will also perform very well in the presidential election, even win it. So that's why I think it is important for ZEC to count the tallies very well. It is important for observers to keep on having a very close eye. It is important for the international community to keep on insisting on a democratic, on a democratic poll.
Yes,
on a democratic
but Vivid,
count,
just in closing,
outcome.
before we let you go, you're saying that, albeit that it was generally a mismanaged election process, delayed ballot papers, intimidation, and of course the suppression of the opposition, that it is a result that Zimbabweans would have to make do with, whether it was free or fair, or whether the process was not conducted adequately. This is just a result that you'd have to make peace with.
Yes, from the onset, I think the opposition and the Zimbabweans have been participating, I think, under protest, because as we were heading into this election, there were many things that people questioned, including the court cases that were trying to, make sure some of the CC candidates would not contest. And one of the candidates, presidential candidate, Sylvia Kaskwere, you saw he didn't manage to contest. We saw the delimitation report, which had a lot of controversies in terms of how the constituencies, were delimited. So I think this is an election in which the opposition has been participating under protest. And you would see why as you look at how the election is panning out. So it's an election that the opposition and Zimbabweans in generally went into under protest, and they will have to make do with an perfect process. But I think that is why also the observer reports that have come out now are important. In trying to determine the quality of this election, and so the results and everything that come are something that is emerging from a situation where people have participated under protest, where the opposition has participated under protest, where people had to make do with a very challenging, administrative situation, very challenging administrative challenges by the Electoral Commission, like the delays I talked about, where people had to vote like midnight, people really had to struggle to participate in those circumstances. And so that's the kind of election that people are having in Zimbabwe. And I think that determines also the final quality of the election.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Thank you indeed for your time. That is political analyst Vivid Gwede joining us from Zimbabwe in Harare, giving us his perspective and observation of the election process thus far, saying that albeit there had been cases of intimidation, it was largely peaceful, and that the opposition is really showing a strong position thus far if the polls are anything to go by.